Somehow, some way, under Steve Wilks, the Carolina Panthers were right there in Week 17 with a chance to go to the playoffs. One could say that they underachieved. Now, with Bryce Young, Frank Reich, and a experienced NFL staff, and some more experience on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, how much is this new coaching staff worth as far as wins go? I'll tell you right here on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays, like today, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. This episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We're back again for another edition of the weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers, where I must apologize. Y'all remember last week and I was like, gosh, didn't get a lot of questions this week. What's going on? I was confused because camp was back. It was about to be August, and that's typically when you see an uptick in listeners. I can see the viewership on YouTube. I can see people listen to the podcast. So the numbers are up. And I was kind of confused why the questions weren't coming in. Then I was on my phone the other day on the old X app or Twitter, or whatever the hell we're calling it now. And I realized that my DMs weren't open. So yeah, that's on me that y'all couldn't DM me. I also told y'all you can at me. And I understand that a lot of people maybe don't want to do that. They rather just, well, they might not have the characters, because a lot of y'all have given me some Steinbeck level questions as far as the length of your questions for mailbags in the past. So maybe that's been the reason why people haven't asked me a question. So yeah, that's on me, y'all. So the DMs are back open. So don't get crazy though, but go ahead and send me those questions in for next Friday. And I had brought this up on last week's show, kind of towards the end, should have done it earlier, but please provide me some feedback. I'm thinking about moving into the season. So when the season's going on, those 18 weeks, I'm going to go live, I believe, on Tuesday evenings around 7 or 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions live on the chat on YouTube. And also, I'll take the questions that I get on Twitter in my DMs, or if you at me. So I'll answer those still the standard way, but I'll do it live. And then I'll take some time to look at some of the questions I get from the YouTube people, because I'm sure there's people who don't have Twitter and have tried to ask me questions on YouTube, and I don't read the comments or respond to anything. So that'd be a great time for the YouTube viewers to be able to actually interact with me that way. So think about doing that live on Tuesday nights. That would be Wednesday's episode. So I always post the episodes the night before on YouTube, and then they come out the next morning. It's at midnight Pacific. So just a little housekeeping there. Just let me know if you guys are cool with that idea, if that's something that makes sense for you. And then on Fridays, try to get a guest or just me break down the game ahead that upcoming Sunday. So that's what I'm thinking about doing for the weekly Friday, or I guess maybe Wednesday mailbag, but doing with the mailbag once the season rolls around. So there's that. Now let's actually get into the show, because y'all have questions, and I'm pretty excited to answer like all of these this week. I think there's some pretty good questions of the ones that I got. Again, my fault. DM should have been open. Let's start off with Derek, who asked me this last week, and I didn't get to it because I had already recorded the show. But this is really interesting. We always play the what if game. What if the Panthers did this? Where would the franchise be? And he asked a pretty good one as far as what the Panthers have done the last 3 years in their NFL drafts in the first round, where they've taken J.C. Horn, Ike Ekwonu, and Bryce Young. He asked me, based off our last 3 drafts, the organization had options to go other directions. Rank these other possible outcomes, and do you feel like we made the right choices? And he said, if possible, factor in the DJ Moore trade. Well, of course. So, of course, the first one is one that the Carolina Panthers did, where they got J.C. Horn, then Yannick Ngakoue, then Bryce Young, where he brings up another scenario with the Carolina Panthers. Instead of J.C. Horn, take Patrick Surtain, who came out of Alabama and has played in Denver. Then take Kenny Pickett, and then Paris Johnson Jr., the tackle out of Ohio State this past year. And the third scenario he has is Justin Fields, who a lot of people wanted back that night when the Carolina Panthers took J.C. Horn, Evan Neal, and then Devin Witherspoon, the cornerback out of Illinois. Now, when I look at this, let me just look at the situation, or at least the guys in each year. So just starting off, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, or Justin Fields, now looking at it today. If anything, this is probably the one I would pick, or I'd change the pick. I would take Patrick Surtain. He has played in all 33 games available. He has 6 interceptions. He's been a pretty damn good player for the Denver Broncos on a defense that last year, with our new DC here in Carolina, EJ, they were top 10 in the NFL in a lot of categories, and he was part of the reason. Fantastic secondary. But most importantly, he's been healthy. And he played at the same level as J.C. Horn in college, playing at Alabama. So you can even say it's a higher level because of Alabama and South Carolina and the differences between those two programs. Both tremendous players. He has the pedigree as his dad, Patrick Surtain, played in the NFL. And Patrick has gone on to have a successful career in college. And so far, early on in his NFL career, that's been the case. So if I was going to change any of these, I would take him instead of J.C. Not to say I don't like J.C. Horn. Don't still think that J.C. Horn can be a good player. We just haven't seen enough of him. And the best ability is availability. And unfortunately, through the first 2 seasons, J.C. Horn's not been available. So I would have taken Patrick Surtain. And in Justin Fields, like I told y'all back then, if the Carolina Panthers wanted Fields or wanted Trey Lance or Mac Jones, any of those 3 that were going to be available, they're at 8th overall. They would not have traded a 2nd and a 4th and a 6th round pick to the New York Jets to bring in Sam Darnold. Like they told y'all 4 weeks before the draft that they wanted Darnold to be their starting quarterback. So at the end, I really was like, whatever, if they take Fields, cool. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense to me. I certainly don't understand why you would give up those assets for Sam Darnold and then draft somebody else. If anything, you should have just kept Teddy Bridgewater, then drafted Fields. That would have made sense. But trading for Darnold and then drafting Fields would not have made any sense, because once you traded for Darnold, you had to pick up the 5th-year option because you're using that as a, hey, 2-year kind of deal to figure out whether he was the guy. Newsflash, he never was, and they found out that that was not the case. So I wouldn't have really changed anything other than I might have taken Patrick Surtain. The second scenario there, as far as just looking at it, Ike Ekwonu, Kenny Pickett, or Evan Neal. Kenny Pickett, God love him, fine, but not great last year. I think Mike Sando of the Athletic had him as like a tier 4 quarterback, or maybe even tier 5 heading into his first full season as a starter there in Pittsburgh this year. He was okay last season, still not great. Didn't love him at Pitt, had a great season his last year there. I just saw way too much bad football to believe that guy's going to be a high-level NFL quarterback and is going to get this team out of the muck. So no, I would not have taken him 6th overall. Evan Neal, I mean, Ike Ekwonu has been a better player. So I'm totally fine with what they did there. And then this past year, Bryce Young, Paris Johnson, or Devin Witherspoon. Well, I would have taken Surtain, so don't really need Witherspoon. And then they already have a tackle in Ekwonu. So yeah, totally fine with them taking Bryce Young. I did say, though, I didn't feel like any of these quarterbacks were worth trading up that high for, but they did it. And here we are. So it ain't really that big of a deal since it's all said and done. So really looking at it, if you're asking me the scenarios and the possibilities, J.C. Horn, Ike Ekwonu, Bryce Young, which the Panthers did, versus Patrick Surtain, Kenny Pickett, Paris Johnson, which of course they didn't do, or Justin Fields, Evan Neal, Devin Witherspoon, I would take what the Panthers did. I think that they've actually made pretty astute first-round picks, which is what the organization has pretty much did. You have like Jeff Otah, who didn't work out. You also got Vernon Butler. But outside of that, they pretty much nailed first-round picks, whether it's been Marty Hurney, Gettleman, Scott Fitterer. They haven't missed yet. Now, the one that they just drafted, they definitely got to hit on that one. So I don't really think even DJ Morton factors into my decision-making here. I would take the scenario where the Panthers took those 3. And then the next one, I would probably take Justin Fields, and I would have kept Teddy Bridgewater. I would have never traded for Sam Darnold, and I would have Fields develop. He could have DJ Moore here in Carolina instead of Chicago, and they could have got Evan Neal, or they could have still just taken Icky and then Devin Witherspoon. So I think that's what I would have done. But the Panthers, what they wanted to do was build a defense. They got J.C. Horn with the entire defensive board there for them. Then they wanted to build the offensive line. They got Ike Ekwonu with the entire offensive board there for them. And then they got a quarterback. So I don't hate their process. I just kind of hate in the manner of how they went about certain things. Like the draft day process makes sense, but like the quarterback, carousel, merry-go-round BS. I didn't really understand that at all. All right, so what is this new coaching staff worth as far as wins go? We have one listener who wants to know that, and I'll let him know, and I'll let all of y'all know that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Underdog is the easiest place to play fantasy football and the best place for best ball. August is here, and you know what that means. The official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out best ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trade. Then Underdog sets your best lineup every single week. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July. So don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKED ON. All right, let's get back into it. The weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. Likely to become the weekly Wednesday mailbag once the season comes around. Let me know what y'all think about that. Let's get into it. Again, Kurt has a question. Kurt, one of our loyal listeners, one of our everydayers here on Locked On Panthers. He asked me, how many wins is this coaching staff worth? Is the staff too good to allow a team, even with a rookie quarterback and some concerns on D-line like edge and cornerback depth, to go something like 5-12? Is our floor 7 wins just based on coaching alone? So based on coaching alone and based on Frank Reich's past, when he has a quarterback, he's in the playoffs. Year 1 in Indy with Andrew Luck, playoff team. Year 3 with Phillip Rivers, playoff team. The other years, not a playoff team. Jacoby Brissett, who, according to Stephen Holder of ESPN.com, who's been all over that Jonathan Taylor situation. Oh, boy. Irsay, what are you doing, buddy? But also, running backs, federal minimum wage. Y'all know how I feel about that, but I do feel bad for him. I have a heart. He told us when we talked to him way back when in the offseason that Jacoby Brissett actually had a really good year that year with Frank Reich until he got hurt. So it's not like Brissett was bad, and Brissett's been a fine backup in this league. Carson Wentz, it was good until it wasn't good in the final 2 weeks of the season. Then Irsay's out there in the tarmac being like, no, this ain't it, y'all. And then last year was an absolute disaster with the carcass that we know as Matt Ryan. 28-3, blew that lead, never forget. It's like the third show in a row I brought that up, by the way. Either way, getting into it, I would just look at that and tell y'all that when he has a quarterback, they're a playoff team. That's TBD here in Carolina, whether they have a quarterback. Looking at last season, I think it's fair to say, like, the Panthers overachieved. They had so many things going against them. They had a horrible head coach in the first place, Matt Rhule. They had a staff that really wasn't up to par with the rest of the NFL. And we've seen it the last couple seasons where the quarterback play has held them back and the head coach and staff has held them back. In the NFL, where it's a salary cap league, everyone's a pro, and it's pretty much a level playing field where everyone's supposed to go 8-9, 9-8. What separates you is coach and quarterback. Why is it that the Chiefs win every year? They have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Why is it that the Jets lose every year? Because they have terrible quarterbacks and dudes like Adam Gase as their head coach. Now, I think Salah might be okay. There's your Jets take for the day. Look at Jacksonville. Bad quarterback play typically, bad head coach. But why did the Jags start winning all of a sudden? They got Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson. It can be that simple. When you have the right coaching staff and the right quarterback, you can win. I feel like they have the right coaching staff, and I do feel like in due time they'll have the right quarterback. That's still TBD as far as Bryce Young goes. Now, their floor, based on what we saw last season, where Baker was awful, PJ was PJ, and Sam, surprisingly, wasn't terrible until the actual Carolina Panthers needed him to be good. They still were able to be in contention for the playoffs after being in a 1-4, really 1-5 hole, because Steve Wilks wouldn't let PJ Walker throw the ball across the line of scrimmage in that game against the Rams. They were in a massive hole in a terrible division and still in it. So you look at that and you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, if they were able to win last year in those circumstances, now with a new coach, new scheme, new defensive scheme as well, and like guys who are veterans and have been in games that mattered in December, shouldn't you think that they'd be right there in the playoff hunt? You only think that really because, well, the division. And there's factors what make you, some of the factors that's brought up are also the factors that would lead you to believe that, oh, this is not going to be a playoff team, which is not exactly what Kurt's asking, but still, like those factors like rookie quarterback, new coaching staff, new schemes, players who ain't never won nothing ever, that would lead you to think that probably wouldn't be a playoff team. But last year, and the result that they showed under Wilks in that fight with this new coaching staff, you would think that, hell, they can't be worse than they were a season ago. And I kind of agree, dude. Like the floor feels like 7. I don't see them going 5-12. I feel like they'll go really as far as Bryce Young can take them. And I know it's asking a lot of a rookie quarterback, but that's kind of how I feel. I do think that I feel like 7 to 9 wins. Like that feels like where they could or should be. So looking at it, what were they? 7 and I guess they were 7-10 last year. I should know this. I do this damn podcast every day. Panthers. Someone's already screaming at me. Panthers 2022 record. They were 7-10. So you would think that they can't be worse than 7-10. So for me, really, I guess I would say this coaching staff's probably worth 2 more wins. You can think of situations where Matt Rhule's cost the Panthers games in the past and quarterback plays cost them games in the past. So it's probably more than 2, but just being, realistic, I would say they're probably worth 2 wins. So yeah, 9-8, that could feel like a good number for the Carolina Panthers this year. All right, over now to Chuck, who has a question. So there's Vietnam, didn't get his name. But Chuck asked me, do you think since we signed Deion Jones that he and Shaq Thompson can play at middle linebacker and we can move Frankie Louvu to the outside linebacker position? Vietnam asking a very similar question, saying, what impact do you think Deion Jones will have on our defense? He was very good. He was a very good player a couple years ago, and I hope that he brings the pain in stopping the run. Well, to answer your question, Vietnam, I think Chuck kind of already answered that with his question of, could the signing of Deion Jones mean that Frankie Louvu gets kicked out to outside linebacker? That would be the impact. I would feel that the Panthers now have more opportunities to, I want to say variety, but that's not the right word. There's more flexibility. There we go. That's the word. There's more flexibility there with this defense. And that's part of the 3-4 scheme, is having that flexibility to where you can be in the odd man front. You can put 4 down linemen. You can have, 4 linebackers out there, and you can interchange what those guys do. You can bring in that nickel like Jeremy Chin. You can do a lot of things, and that's why it's really become popular. And that's why the Panthers wanted to bring that defensive scheme here to allow these guys to do some different things. And Frankie Louvu, we saw last year in a system with Phil Snow as a DC, and then even once Al Holcomb and Steve Wilks took over the defense, like he didn't always just play it inside linebacker, right? And especially when Phil Snow was here, he put them all over the field. He put all these guys all over the field. Love the safety blitz, especially even like up the zero gap, which is incredible. So I'm one of the guys where I think Frankie Louvu, out of necessity, probably needed to play some outside linebacker this year anyways. But I still think that he can and should be able to play off ball at the inside linebacker position next to Shaq Thompson. But Deion Jones has been way too good of a player over the his course of his career for him not to be out there. 5 of the 7 seasons, he's had over 100 tackles. And let's just go, every season he's been healthy, which has been 5 of those 7, he's had over 100 tackles. So when Deion Jones is healthy, which he says he is, Deion Jones gets 100 tackles. So if that guy's healthy, how can you not put him on the field? And we can't forget about Camus, Grier-Hill, and what he could add to this defense. He ain't just a special teams guy. So the Panthers are in a good spot there at inside linebacker. So I do think that Deion Jones elevates, he raises the floor. We're talking about the floor of what this team could be record-wise. He's part of the raising the floor, what they can do defensively. Because if Shaq goes down, you got a guy who's been out there and has been productive in his career. If Frankie goes down, same case. And you can put him on the field and have Frankie Louvu and Shaq Thompson also on the field. And then Brian Burns out there as well at his outside linebacker spot. The possibilities, they're not endless, but they're far greater than what they were Monday morning before Deion Jones was a Carolina Panther. So really good signing there for the Panthers. All right. Got to talk more about expectations. Also, a question about one Yannick Ngakoue and why the hell is he not a Carolina Panther? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. All right, let's get back into it. A few more questions here on Locked On Panthers Weekly Friday mailbag. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council. These two people decided that they were going to DM me on Instagram. They were like, Twitter, X, I ain't doing that. I'm going to DM this guy on Instagram. Now, again, my DMs are closed. My bad. It's fixed. Problem's fixed, y'all, I promise. But we got Tyler, who is from Denver, which God bless you, Tyler. That's going to be kind of tough to be a Panthers fan living in Denver. I know Josh Klein, friend of the show, the Right Report, he lived in Denver for a period of time. And I got a friend who's a Denver Broncos fan who lives here. And, you know, there's a photo of a Super Bowl party that I was not able to attend because I was up in Connecticut at the time grinding. And, yeah, it was the only Broncos fan there to celebrate and gloat. Way to go, Mike Rimmers. But to your question, Tyler says, I'm from Denver. And I guess he lives in Denver and a Panthers fan. But the story around the Broncos is a year of turnaround with a new coach, etc. I found it hard to buy into that here. And I'm curious, as a Panthers fan, what should my realistic expectations be for Reich this coming year from a fan's perspective? I'm optimistic, but Matt Rhule really left a bad taste in my mouth for turnarounds. Yeah, he sure did, man. He sure did. God, Matt Rhule spent so much time afterwards. It's called public relations. That's what Matt Rhule's doing. So anybody who gets upset about it, it's PR, folks. He's going to Nebraska. I mean, he's already at Nebraska, but he was going to Nebraska. He was trying to get a fan base that has been kicked in the nuts so many times recently by coaches who are going to be turnaround artists. And that has not happened. Instead, they've been turnover artists. That's what Scott Frost literally was. The prodigal son came home. It didn't work. But Matt Rhule was basically trying to let people know, it's okay, well, I got there and, you know, we lost all our defensive veterans, which they did. You watched Bruce Irvin leave. You saw, what was it? Kaylon Short was still there, but they lost Bruce Irving. They had brought in Gerald McCoy, but he got hurt. And then you saw Luke Kuechly leave. You saw Mario Addison leave. Like, they had to rebuild the defense. So I understand like why they kind of focused on rebuilding the defense the way that they did when you looked at what they lost. And then it was his decision and the owner's decision and Marty Herney's decision to move off of Cam Newton. So he put himself in an own situation with the quarterbacks, even though, I mean, maybe Cam, we saw some good, decent Cam there in 2020. So he probably probably been better off with Cam that last year. There's still the questions of whether Cam would have played on that deal. I think it was $19 million guaranteed and all that kind of stuff, which is, we'll never know. But Matt Rhule was doing PR afterwards. That's what he was doing. And explaining why things didn't really work out here in Carolina. And that's kind of what Sean Payton was doing this week when he threw Nathaniel Hackett all the way under a moving freight train and said he did one of the worst coaching jobs in NFL history, which everyone agrees with. But because Sean Payton has such, kind of face, everyone's like, oh, God, this guy, even though Broncos fans agree and every team in the NFL agrees. And come on, let's be real. Jets fans, you agree. You just might love your guy now. And Aaron Rodgers loves him. And maybe it was uncalled for, but it's something that people have been saying about that dude since week 1 in Seattle when he decided to kick like a 60-yard field goal. Like, that was asinine. But either way, like, as far as just like expectations, I don't think Matt Rhule should sour you when you look at just Matt Rhule was not up for the task. Matt Rhule did not come out and hire the right staff. And I get in the NFL, it's different. In college, you can poach whenever the hell you want. In the NFL, these guys are under contract. It's a level playing field. You just can't poach a guy. So he came in, and it's very possible that he didn't have the guys that he wanted. Well, come on, dude. He brought in Terrence Knighton. He brought in Phil Snow. He brought in Evan Cooper. He brought a ton of dudes that were there with him at Temple and then the Baylor to the NFL. So the staff was never up to snuff. Whereas you look at Frank Reich, he's bringing in Ejiro Evero, who has only had 1 year as a coordinator, but he's been under some pretty damn good staffs there in Los Angeles with Sean McVay, where also Jonathan Cooley was and Thomas Brown was. So he's taking guys from his successful staff and putting them on his staff. He's taking veteran coaches who had success in the past that were already here and kept them, and Chris Tabor and with James Campen. He's gone out there and he's brought in a young, smart offensive potential play caller in Parks Frazier, who called plays last year in Indianapolis. He went out and got someone who's not too far removed from the position of playing quarterback to be the quarterback coach as a first-time coach in Josh McCown. He's done that. He's brought in Jim Caldwell. He's brought in, he's brought in, I almost cursed. He's brought in, oh my God, how am I forgetting his name right now? Our first coach ever here, Dom Capers. He's brought in all these people with all this experience. Compare that to what Rhule did. And then compare that to now the roster that he's taking over, a roster that isn't just completely green like Rhule had. It's a roster of guys who have played a ton of snaps the last couple of years. Now, have they had success? Sparingly. So it's a different situation where he's, I think, taking over a much better situation, but has the better tools to actually turn things around here. And I agree, because last year I was bullish on this team. What a moron I was. And I am to this day, I imagine. But for me, and I think it actually would be smart to protect your heart by being like, they got to prove it to me first before I really buy in. And that's my thing. Like, I think like 7, 8 or 9 wins, like that's kind of like the sweet spot. I'm not expecting anything. I'm not expecting playoffs. I'm not expecting anything above that. For me, they got to prove it first, because I don't even know if these guys can win. So I get why you would be skeptical, and I'm a natural skeptic myself, because just there's so many things in the world to be skeptical about. In particular, the Carolina Panthers football franchise. Like, it's hard to believe in them, but I can believe in this turnaround with these guys, this staff, Frank Reich, way more than Matt Rhule, which I never even really bought into because the college guys don't work. So yeah, what's happening in Denver? I think they probably have bigger problems. Like, Russell Wilson might actually be cooked. So we'll find out this season. But I think this is a turnaround you can believe in particular, considering the division. Like, they're still playing the Chiefs twice, right? They still play the Chargers twice, and then the Raiders twice there in Denver. Good luck. All right, final question coming from Alex, who said, you mentioned the Yannick Ngakoue, Frank Reich Colts connection as a reason why he could be brought in. Is it possible that's the reason why he's not a Panther? With 9.5 sacks last season, it's hard to imagine we wouldn't be interested unless there is no love lost between the two. I cannot sit here and pretend as if I have any idea of the relationship that Frank Reich and Yannick Ngakoue have. I know that Ngakoue has a new agent. I know that he's available, and I know that the knock on him is he does not help you in run defense. And from the people we talked to on the show, we talked to Mike Kay, talked to Nick Carboni yesterday. What have they talked about this coaching staff really wants? Flexibility. If Ngakoue is someone that you can really only add on the field on one down, is that someone that you want to give the kind of money he's probably looking for? Like, is he worth $10 million? Maybe, if he can give you 9.5 sacks, but if that's all he's providing and he's not giving you anything else for those other 2 downs or on special teams, is that something they want to bring in? So I don't know. Frank Reich coached him very briefly. I mean, he was there with him throughout the offseason program and in the first, 5 or so games last season before getting ousted there. So he has somewhat a relationship. I don't know how strong it is. I don't know how he feels about it. I don't know if they talked to him, because I brought up Leonard Floyd. We all brought up Leonard Floyd and his connection to the defensive staff here in Carolina, and he ended up in Buffalo. Now, if I was someone who had already won a Super Bowl, I mean, I'm probably going wherever the money's at. But if I'm someone who wants to go win, then yeah, are you going to fault him for going to the Buffalo Bills? Which is crazy to say, but Buffalo's pretty good. No, I wouldn't. I don't fault him for doing that. But what I'm curious is, were the Panthers ever interested? Like, was that relationship as close as we think maybe it could have been? And I'm not saying that it was. I'm just, it made sense. Just with, you see a lot oftentimes, like Justin McCray's here in Carolina because he's been in Cleveland. He's been in Green Bay, I believe. I think he's been in Houston with James Campen. We saw Matt Rhule bring in his Temple guys. We saw when Ron Rivera left here, he brought Heineke, he brought Kyle Allen, he brought Joey Sly. Some coaches have their guys. So when you have your guys, they typically follow you. So maybe, Alex, you bring up a decent point. Maybe Yannick Ngakoue, who played for Frank Reich for like 6 games, is not one of Frank Reich's guys. Taylor Stallworth, who he brought in, sounds like he might be a Frank Reich guy. So I don't know. Don't know. But that, you can't rule it out. Maybe that is the reason. They know him, they being the coach, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with that. We'll see, because that certainly is a glaring need. But then Mike Kay brought up to us that They understand it's a 2-year rebuild. So do they need to go out there and pay money for Yannick Ngakoue? Or should they just save those resources with the guys on the roster? Who knows? So there we go. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And, of course, follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. I guess you can also DM me on Instagram, since that's something people are doing. And that handle, too, is at Julian Council. And I'm on Threads at Julian Council. Hit me there. Instagram, Threads, Twitter, wherever. Facebook, don't use that. I don't use that. But wherever you want to do to get your questions in, go ahead and do that. And I'll answer them next Friday here on the weekly Friday mailbag on Locked On Panthers. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, and as always, keep pounding.